part 6 of building the UCS Falcon. I wasn't planning on doing one. I've been at work for pretty much almost the entire day, but I don't know if I'm going to be free to do anything over the weekend. So it's essentially one of those things that's like, do I not do one today, or do I just do one today in case there's not one the next couple of days? And I'll be honest, I feel like I've progressed quite well with it. There was no off camera building, but I have tried out what's going to be its permanent display box. Obviously, most Lego sets in my collection, right, have the ability to be moved and change display. I feel like the Falcon is one of those ones that will be forever one of the more limited, where can I put it type models. And I've got something pretty cool to show you. I'm going to go to the toilet before we get properly into it. But I've put up those lights I talked about in the very first stream. And I'm trialing where it is. But this is probably where it'll end up. Yes, it's incomplete. We don't even have the cockpit or nothing. Who knows, maybe this is the live stream where that happens. It's basically almost complete underneath, give or take a few panels, but it looks like a Falcon, and it fits just the way I thought it would, which is pretty exciting. So I'll be literally right back, and then we'll get into the stream. Of course, we'll have to bring out all the parts. All right, I'll get her. We'll give her a no. What do you think? No. That's the thing. Well, I think that's good girl. One then. Hello. Yeah. What? Oh, you know. You want me? No. I've got the cat in. Did you get away? She came in right away. Hey. Me neither. I'm going on bed. No. Definitely. What a aye. Yeah. Aye. Right, we're going to get started. So, my goal, progress-wise, is go until I can't be bothered. So, essentially, in the last episode, we did a couple. We did the underneath panels, the one that's solid, and then the one that has the boarding ramp. Then we did the top and bottom turrets. What else did we do? Or did we end? No, we did the underneath back paneling. Or, well, I'd say like 80% of that. So, do you guys want to see? This is a teaser for how it's going to be displayed. Check this. Yes, I know I've just made things dark, but. So, it's got these lights, right? And we'll get the lights on. Right, and I did illuminate the shelf with the UCS Slave 1 and B wing on it, because that just made sense, right? Check this. Does that look like a hangar or what? How cool is that, eh? Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. It's like £2 lights from B&M. I'm quite taken aback at how well that worked. Gonna grab a few more of them, but I do like that kind of illuminated and not illuminated look. Right, one sec. Yes, and by the way, I'm aware that I'm 12 minutes in and not building. Probably about a 20-minute mark we'll be building. But yeah, as far as display goes, that is pretty nice looking. When I was digging the stuff off of that shelf to place it there last night, because I just wanted to see how it would fit going forward. Found this, which I remember buying rolls of this at one point, and I tried doing a test of it on YouTube. There's a video, I say YouTube because normally I don't stream on YouTube, but on here, and it's the Makaya, however you want to say that. It's the, and the only reason I've ever bought this because it was £1.75 instead of £7. And me and a friend of mine went and bought these. He bought like a couple different colors. I think he bought like tan and whatnot, and worked around. I believe it worked for him. I tried it with the Batwing and the Indiana Jones plane from 2023. Both those sets did not end well. Right, so let's get the drawers out of those bits and we'll get building. So as far as I'm aware, we ended off on what was going to be another one of those underside panels. So see if we could even just get the full underside paneled in this one. I'm happy. Like, I feel like that would be the reasonable goal to try and achieve. You know, just have the entire underside of the Falcon paneled. Which means when I come back, if I do take a break from doing these to go do what I'm thinking about doing at the weekend, that means it's just all the top half. But you know, it would be nice to possibly get. I don't want to get my hopes up, but it'd be nice to have the full Falcon silhouette. And what I mean by that is, you know, we do the other part that would make it almost like right now it more or less resembles a Falcon, but it doesn't have its cockpit added in yet. That's the main part. So I do plan to add that in. Maybe not in this stream, but it's an interesting goal I could attempt. Right, there we go. So I'll be able to go longer because I am in work, but I don't have to go to work as early as I have been. If we do take that break, because if I choose not to take the break, right, I could work over this over the whole course of the next couple of days and probably be done by what, maybe Monday. But all next week, it's like full day shifts that I'm gonna have me doing just to play catch up or whatnot, like try to get something done. And so, yeah, that's kind of what motivated tonight's stream. Was like, yeah, crap, I'd maybe like to have some more progress like that. We'll get them instructions. So I'm curious. I'll quickly double check what part of it is we're actually going to go on building. So I like giving a goal. In the last couple of years, I've started to give goals on what I kind of wanted to do. And the fact that we're on live stream number 6, right? I means what? Wait, I'm trying to math this correctly in my head. Did I mean we've spent 5 days building? Because I can only think of one day where I had 2 live streams. Yep. All right. So I've got a quick message here I'm going to reply to. Right, so the next one's a panel. Where's that one going? So that's the other back side, and then I'm building this other panel, which goes under where the cockpit would go. Okay, so that's 2 panels off the bat, and those look like really quick things to build. Then you're building another underneath panel, which then goes on the other end. So that would be like all the corners, everything at the bottom kind of paneled off. So that's 3 panels there, right? They're quite quick to build. After that, you're building the top paneling for the mandibles, which are the kind of fork prong-like things that stick out. The mandibles are probably the bit that take the longest to build in this stream. Plus, they are slightly confusing the way the instructions do them. But see, to have those paneled off, it'll be a really nice look. Like, it'll be cool because even looking at it, right, up from the shelf, yes, I can see the gap. There's a huge gap there, right, because I've got the back end paneled off underneath. I've got the front end of that mandible all sorted, but you can see the gap between the mandible and the main frame that I've not built the panels for yet. That does annoy me. So right, after you've done all that, and you add a few detail parts onto it, whatnot, okay. Try to figure out where I want my goat, what I want my goat to be. Then we're building, is that the top panel? Yep, so that's like the top front panel, okay. Right. Like page 212 there. Star Wars reference. Yeah, okay, and then you're building the 2 airlocks. And then you get the cockpit. So I'm on page 181 and on page 218. That's almost another 40 pages before we get to that. And keep in mind all the intricate building. One sec. All right, I'll get some background noise on the go, but the falcon looks really nice up there. And apart from the panels, which what I'm planning to do is build all this secondary assembly stuff that is separated from the main build, then clicks on. Build it all, have it maybe in a corner over there somewhere, and basically right at the very end of the stream we'll attach it all. Because if I don't, listen, as much as it'd be nice to have the falcon here, it is so cumbersome, it is so big. By the way, it's almost like I've got that takes up an entire Ivor shelf. And if you've seen the Ivor shelf system, you'll know what I mean by that, like how good those shelves are space-wise. Right, so put that there. But yeah, we'll see how far we can get. If I can have the whole underneath paneling finished, to me that's like a good amount to have done in a stream, and I'm happy with that. What's the cool thing is I'll have these for sorting after, which a lot of people I was talking to in Discord and whatnot, and other places were kind of amazed that I got these shipped with it. But listen, I'm amazed that I got something like this shipped with it. That's kind of nuts. Like, most sellers don't go to this level. Plus, try and name a better way to de-stress after a long day at work. Because this is my ideal way of doing it. Someone probably can name a better way that isn't as insane. Right, I have all my parts in front of me. Right, so what we're going to have on. Last night, I don't know why, but I downloaded Train Simulator. And by the way, this is live stream number 6, and we've still not ran. None of these trades are completely empty. A couple are getting really close, though.
Feel the power to lower prices with Tesco Club Card. Don't just see a place, experience it. Master ramen with a chef. Dive into underground jazz with a musician. Or see Notre Dame with someone who helped restore it. Airbnb experiences.
Last week I took a trip to Hyington. You might never have heard of Hyington, but there's a lot of people who think you should know it a lot better, because it has a pretty good claim to be the oldest railway station in the world. Now, I should say that that's a title with several asterisks next to it, so perhaps I should put it into a little historical context. Hyington is now on the Bishop line between Bishop Auckland and Darlington, but it was opened by the Stockton and Darlington Railway. The Stockton and Darlington first began service in 1825.
Right, let's get building. So I'm going to need that box that I have here, which is like 90% panels. So I built one of these last night, and they are, like I said, super quick builds.
Railway opened as the first main line railway. But I think it's fair to say that the Stockton and Darlington Railway was where the various technical innovations needed for the railway age started to come together. You may disagree on whether this constitutes the beginning, but there's a big year-long train party going on, and I'm certainly not going to spoil it. Here at Hyington, the first steam locomotive...
Right, I need that one that's mostly tiles and decorative parts. That's the one.
Now known as locomotion, but back then known as active. I sometimes wonder if there was ever a stationary engine named passive. Anyway, locomotion looked nothing like this. It looked more like this replica at Hometown. 3 teenage boys assisted in getting it onto the track and were offered a ride, thus becoming the first recorded passengers to be hauled by steam on a public railway. Hyington Station did not exist in 1825. Rather, it was a goods depot. This wall here was once the upper part of a set of coal drops which allowed children wagons to be emptied into waiting carts. Passenger services in the early days were primitive, consisting of a coach hauled by a horse. The coaches were not much different from stage coaches. Passengers were picked up from wherever. They flagged the coach down and climbed aboard. But the operators of the railway noticed that in certain places you got more passengers than in other places. Hyington was one, and so this was chosen as the site of what we now call the station.
See.
A little way down the line was a coaching inn known as the Fighting Cocks. It's still there, by the way. Passengers would often do so in the inn as they did for a stagecoach, meaning that the Fighting Cocks fulfilled some of the functions of a station. Indeed, the railway company would later build an actual station there, which is now closed, but that's another story. But I hope
Yeah,
this
leaning
also
on the
shows
instructions
how
and
railways
finding is
work
not that fun.
with only one station. This is a question I get asked a lot. The answer was that trains stopped at other places, and those other places just weren't stations yet. It's no surprise that John Falcus Carpenter, the company architect, took inspiration from coaching inns when he designed the building. The building is sadly derelict at present, but this bit here was divided into waiting rooms, and this bit was an actual inn. So the Stockton and Darlington invented both the station and being drunk on a train. The innkeeper had to juggle serving food and drink with selling tickets, receiving parcels, and dealing with admin relating to the goods depot. In effect, he became the first station master. Actually, the building.
These are a little bit finicky to get built unless you have something solid to. Wait a minute, I have a table.
Tickets, but I couldn't tell you how that works. This here is what remains of the world's first station platform. It was at ground level. As with coaches, it was simply accepted that you'd climb up. The platforms at Paddington are still very low, but not quite that bad. There was only one platform back in 1847 serving crews going both ways. The station was built in 1826 and opened in 1827 as Aycliffe Lane. In 1847, it was named Aycliffe and Hyington. In 1871, and in 1874, Hyington. And so it remained. Aycliffe Lane would be followed in quick succession by a number of other stations on the line. In 1828, locomotion exploded here, killing its driver. The driver, John Creed, had tied the safety valve down to, as it were, overclock the boiler, and learned the hard way why it's called a safety valve. Locomotion was rebuilt a number of times to the extent that the current engine has basically nothing of the original, as I understand. That's partly because of rapid advances in steam technology, and partly because when it was restored for preservation in 1856, they just used whatever appropriately contemporary parts they could find to fix it up. But because it looked like this for the longest time, that's the form in which it's usually depicted. There's a lot of philosophical questions raised by that engine. But anyway, Hyington, primitive though it was compared to what came later, has a strong
Some of these, how many?
in that it was
One.
the first built as such by the railway company. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway concepts in Darlington, which is why some historians prefer to argue that the Liverpool and Manchester built the first true stations. Certainly it didn't take long for the concept of the station to evolve into what we see today. The next station up the line.
Then you build the Technic bit, and then it's on, and within, half an hour, pretty much built the first assembly nearly.
It's not so different from the kinds of stations we see today. Similar form, similar layout. Mistaken other than the station. I'm going with the travel big news. He's confirmed the profits are up again. Might have shared their profits with over 4 million of their members. What? Shouldn't we try and do something similar for our customers? Where do we? We're giving £100 to every eligible member. Nationwide. A good thing.
You know that being a soldier is exciting, but what the best story is, what's in it for me? That's what's in it for me.
The Technic pins for that one. I'll stick. I'm debating, do I just. No. I can tell the difference between which ones are which. It's got to build the bracket that holds it all together.
The railways went from just a fancy kind of road to a distinctive form of transport in their own right. Stations came to form a focal point for towns. In some cases, the town grew around the station. So what became of Hyington itself? Well, now it has 2 platforms, albeit very offset. The Stockton and Darlington
The brackets are just these pieces here.
Railway in 1863, and it was they who built the signal box in 1872. Hyington Signal Box is one of the oldest operating signal boxes in the country, so that's another claim to fame. There was a royal ordnance factory here.
So this will go on the other side from what we built
Very useful.
yesterday. I'm just going to leave it there.
The platforms were extended and shelters were added. The shelters have since been removed and trains are typically only 2 coaches these days, so that's sad. In 1970, the goods yard closed and now that's the car park. And in 1982, the station building was sold off and once again converted into a pub. Unfortunately, history repeated itself and the pub went out of business again in 2017. Since then, it has lain derelict. Historic England and the Friends of the Stockton and Darlington Railway have looked into its history further and have been campaigning to save it. By 2024, the building was on the Heritage at Risk register. But I have good news. In 2015, the station gained new neighbours in the form of Hitachi Rail Europe's new factory. And it
Right,
was that
so next
company that
panel.
donated the money necessary to save it. It was also they that hosted the event I attended to celebrate the saving of the station. Afterwards, we took a trip to hometown Darlington, where some of the battery technology that Hitachi is developing was on display in the Steam to the Future exhibition. As regular viewers will know, I'm following the rapid improvements in battery technology for railways with some interest. We're working on battery units that can literally be swapped out with diesel engines and charged from overhead wires. It's all a bit technical for me, but I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. What's next for high altitude? The plan over the next few years is to restore it as close as possible to 1820s condition. And yes, that means it's going to be a pub again. I'm looking forward to it because that means the Bishop Line will have 3 important railway attractions in fairly close proximity. Darlington, the Inn at Hyington, and the Locomotion Museum at Childon. I mean, that's a pretty good day out, I think. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video, and if so, you may wish to leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I'm thinking I might do a video looking in more detail at North Road and Hopetown in the next few weeks, because frankly I've ended up at Hopetown 3 times this year, and I am certain I have enough footage. And they've generally been really nice. I would like, as always, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the station master's duties to my publican. I must also thank Hitachi, the Friends of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, and the staff of Hopetown Darlington.
There we go.
I'd particularly like to thank Niall Hammond, who answered all the questions I had. I also referred to the National Transport Trust's website and
That should be a longer.
and Dennis A. Lovett, which between them answered most of the questions I forgot to ask. I assume that the numbers are mine. I hope to see you all again very soon. Cheerio.
That one's too long. Right, so one was too short, one was too long. What's the one that would just be the right side? That's the one.
The strength of Britain lies in her iron and coal beds, and the locomotive is destined above all other agencies to bring it forth. The Lord Chancellor now sits upon a bag of wool, but wool has long since ceased to be emblematical of the staple commodity of England. He ought rather to sit upon coals. Some of the events they've got going on. As a professional, so it was that I headed north to Darlington. As LNER are one of the sponsors of the event, they laid on the tickets, which was excellent. I always love travelling up the East Coast Main Line, but first class, chef's kiss. SNDR 200 celebrates the 200th anniversary of the opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, arguably the dawn of the railway age. Now, it's a difficult thing to pin down. It's not like one day there were no railways, and the next you could visit your aunt's in Bournemouth. And that's what the exhibition at Hopetown Darlington is about. Hopetown Darlington is a museum dedicated to the Stockton and Darlington Railway and railways in northeast England. In fact, into the old North Road.
1 second, I'm trying to concentrate because it's grey on grey can be slightly difficult, especially with these instructions. There we go.
If railway history begins in 1825, this was railway prehistory.
You shouldn't have to outrun deodorant clouds. Try this, bro. Bulldog spray deodorant. It's naturally from milk, so very nice fumes. Smells well nice. Good talk.
Railways have existed for centuries, and depending how you define these things, even millennia. The principle is simple. Smooth wheels on a smooth, level surface with some means of guiding vehicles along that surface. But it wasn't until the 19th century that this concept would receive the boost necessary to revolutionize the world. And that came from a Cornishman named Richard Trevithick. There's a replica of Trevithick's first successful locomotive on display here. But
So these are the front underneaths.
Spin-off from his earlier invention, the high-pressure steam engine, or what he called strong steam. Engines powered by steam were nothing new, but the type Trevithick grew up with were low pressure. Great big things requiring dedicated buildings, affected by the weather, affected by altitude. Useful in their way, but limited. Strong steam could be built into compact engines that could be installed anywhere. Trevithick saw enormous possibilities for this. Factories, ships, road carriages, and railways. He may have built the first railway locomotive in 1802 at Coalbrookdale in Shropshire. But we don't know for sure. There's not a lot of information about it. We don't know if it ever ran or if it was even completed. This engine, the Penny Darren locomotive, is a replica of the first locomotive that definitely existed and definitely worked. The first working locomotive was the result of a bet. One of Trevithick's supporters, Samuel Homfray of the Penny Darren Ironworks in Merthyr Tydfil, wagered that it was possible for a locomotive to haul 10 tons of iron along the 9
Is that apart from the bracket? Yeah. So I'm saying these are really quick, easy assemble. I wonder what the top panels will be like. If they'll be the same kind of idea, like build a few leather plates in a bracket, or if it's going to be, different.
Nevertheless, it made the journey at a speed of 4 miles per hour. The Penny Darren locomotive was a crude thing compared to what would come later, but it had proven a point. Trevithick would go on to build other locomotives to improve the technology, but it wouldn't be the only one. It was the locomotive in Moore, South Wales. It was steam engine time. In the northeast, there were many coal mines, and across the country there was a growing demand for coal. The fastest means of transport was by water, either by river around the coast or...
If anyone's wondering the name of the YouTube channel in the background, is called Jago Hazard.
Getting the coal from the ground to the water. Many collieries had tramways or plateways connecting the mines to the nearest wharf. These were worked by horses, but there was a problem. The Napoleonic Wars were raging. There was a shortage of fodder for horses, with so much of it going to the war effort. There was also a shortage of manpower thanks to so many patriotic lads heading off to give old Boney what for. As every coal cart needed a man and a horse, this left the colliery owners in a quandary. Whoever could find a solution stood to make an awful lot of money. Maybe Trevithick's invention was that solution. But there were doubts. For one thing, Trevithick's engine had been too heavy for the rails. Rather than relay the track with strong
And that's that one bolt.
many engineers took this as a sign that one simply could not build an engine strong enough to haul wagons, while also being light enough to operate on conventional smooth rails. The manager of the Middleton colliery, John idea of a rack rail laid alongside the existing track. The locomotive was fitted with a cogwheel that could engage with the rack, and the theory was that this would give the engine the necessary traction. The first locomotive, designed by Matthew Murray and probably named Prince Regent, arrived in 1812. That same year, a similar idea was patented by William H.
So one more of those underneath to build. Let's get going.
But nothing was so which was in any case, the Japanese system didn't really work well. It was mechanically cumbersome and the chain broke. But it wouldn't be William Chapman's last foray into locomotive design, and that brings us to the here. Known as Elephant or Steam Elephant, I understand there's some debate on this. This engine is derived from a chain engine in many ways, but it's much more conventional. The design this is actually a replica. The original was built in 1815. That was a significant year for early railways because that was also the year when William Headley proved that actually smooth wheels on smooth rails were just fine. The locomotive with which he did this is preserved in the Science Museum in London. There's a lot we don't know about Elephant.
Imagine this one might look a bit different, just close with the Falcon being the ship that is going to have some mismatched parts, some worn out kind of looking parts. Going to be doing the brackets in a moment.
Using a winding engine to haul coal wagons from the shafts to the surface, freeing up men and increasing productivity. He undertook other engineering tasks relating to the colliery railways, which gave him an understanding of what was practical. In 1813, the nearby collieries of Kenton and Coxlodge, where George's brother Robert was engineman, bought a steam locomotive. It was of the Murray and Blenkinsop kind, and George was mightily interested in what he saw. He was commissioned by the directors of the Killingworth Colliery to build a locomotive for their own railway. He studied the work of Murray and Blenkinsop, but also William Headley and Timothy Hackworth. His first locomotive, named My Lord, was crude but did the job, being completed in 1814. It was followed in short order by one named Blucher, and it is believed 14 more locomotives. We can't be entirely sure, records are patchy. With the Battle of Waterloo and the end of the Napoleonic Wars, many collieries lost interest in steam, which seems strange. A locomotive could haul 10 times what a horse could, and only
Right, so bracket time.
both of which were in abundant supply. Nevertheless, it was also a handful of tracks to
I
new technology.
am hoping that this is. I'm 90% sure, well, 99% sure this is the final bit like this I'm going to have to do.
Following my visit to Hull, I was privileged to go behind the scenes of the Durham, an archive and relating to the Stockton, including these plans for the line signed by Stevenson himself. It wasn't the first engineer to the project. That was John Recce, who intended the route to be a canal and surveyed it. But one of the main backers of the project, really the driving force, was the businessman Edward Pease, and the canal would have completely avoided his estate. So the engineer George Overton was engaged to design a railway. What made this railway different from the ones we've already talked about here is that it would have been a public railway. Now the roads in those days were very poor, so the turnpike trusts were set up roads which were better quality and paid for by their users. The Stockton and Darlington Railway or Tram Road, as the document puts it, was to operate on this basis. Anyone could send their wagon on a road or a fee. It wasn't the first railway to operate like this. The Lock Railroad in West Yorkshire and the Surrey Iron Railway in, well, Surrey, got there first. Like those predecessors, the Stockton and Darlington was to be worked by horse or manpower.
I'm debating I might just bring the Falcon down to stick these panels on.
An engine on the public road.
It depends, because I'm trying to remember if the next thing we build actually has to be built directly onto it or not. If it does, Falcon's coming down for the rest of the live stream. But it's nice not having it right next, because unless you've built one of the UCS Falcons, try that test squad right again. It's hard to explain this nice.
Lower prices with Tesco Club Card. Fast delivery. Thrilling entertainment. It's on Prime for $8.99 a month.
Where's the backup?
There is no backup.
In any case, no one
It's not
invested
sticking.
what a locomotive was, so it was struck from the parliamentary bill. Initially, the railway was defeated in Parliament, but following amendments to the plan, it was authorised in 1821. However, Pease did not have unreserved faith in Overton, and so met with George Stephenson. Stephenson proposed the innovation that would put the Stockton and Darlington in the history books: to use steam locomotives. This would make it the first public railway to do so, and thus the ancestor of all modern railways. He reworked the design to enable steam traction. Among his assistants was his 18-year-old son Robert, who would go on to have an equally glittering career on the pioneering.
What's wrong with this?
Should not be confused with George's brother Robert or his father Robert. Stephenson and Pease founded a locomotive company in 1823, Robert Stephenson and Company. Their first
You know what? Not even an hour in, and we have the first three components completely assembled on the table.
Final engine on display in the Railway Pioneers exhibition. But it should be pointed out that when it was originally built, locomotion looked nothing like this. Fortunately, Hopetown has a replica of what it is believed to have actually looked like on permanent display. Following several rebuilds and a boiler explosion, there was basically nothing of the original left by the time it was withdrawn in 1856. The remains and a bunch of era-appropriate parts were Frankenstein together at the instigation of Joseph Pease, son of Edward, to create something that looked sort of like the original. But I'm leaping ahead. On the 27th of September 1825, the Stockton and Darlington Railway was opened, and Active took pride of place at the head of the first official train. Attached to that train was the passenger coach Experiment, which meant that this was also the first time passengers had been hauled by steam on a public railway. Well, unless you count the test run the previous day. In a very literal sense, the Stockton and Darlington Railway set the standard. It was laid to a gauge of 4 feet 8.5 inches, Stephenson's preferred gauge that would become the standard gauge for Britain and a large portion of the world. The S&DR was basic compared to what would come a few years later with the opening of...
Right, so we now get to the point where the mandibles, their paneling gets done, so I don't need to bring it down, which is, again, very handy if I don't have to. Because it's to the point where it points right out here or right out here, and that's...
The railway mania was in full swing. Soon the world would be crisscrossed by parallel places once considered painfully distant could be reached in hours. Transporting goods across the globe with cars, cities.
So essentially, it's the same build that I did when building them originally, but only the details and stuff like that, you'll be able to see it.
They were celebrated in literature, music, and film. The new need for
Right, one sec. There we go. Looking for those.
time was adopted as standard. Even time itself would be spiked to the iron way.
Probably better building it on here.
Years later, in a world that Trevithick, Chapman, and Stevenson would barely recognize. Perhaps the best way to end would be with another quote attributed to Stevenson, found in Smiles' biography and told to the author by John Dixon. The time will come when railways will supersede almost every other form of conveyance in this country. When mail coaches will go by railway, and railroads will become a highway for the king and all his subjects.
Right.
I know there will be great and almost insurmountable difficulties to be encountered. But what I have said will come to pass, as sure as you Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then please do leave a like. Secondly, subscribe if you have not already done so. And thirdly, why not pay a visit to Hopetown and The Story, who have provided much assistance in the making of this video. The Steam Pioneers exhibition at Hopetown is running until the 22nd of June, and entry to the museum and the exhibition is free. As well as the stuff I've talked about, the museum has a lot of history of railways in the northeast, and the A1 Steam Locomotive Trust is based there. So you can look at the very latest locomotive under construction, the Prince of Wales. Hopetown is on the original Stockton and Darlington Railway, and here's my suggestion to you. When you've finished at Hopetown, head up the line to Shildon and visit the Locomotion Museum, where you can see many other important exhibits from railway history. Hopetown and Locomotion together make an excellent day out. What we've seen at The Story is by way of a preview of the All Change exhibition, which will be running from the 25th of May to the 26th of January. And will be
But yeah, once these bits are built, I may do that top panel. Be nice for the top of it to change. But I do think it's smart that they make you build all the bottom stuff first, because I don't know, there's some Lego sets where common sense is just a non-existent concept.
And I'll put a link to the website below so you can check it out for yourself. You may notice that I sort of skipped over the history of the Stockton and Darlington itself there. I'm planning another video later on to coincide with another event that will cover both locomotion and the railway in more detail. I would like to thank S&DR 200, Hopetown, The Story, and Flint Culture for arranging for me to have a look around, as well as LNER for the train tickets. I would also like to thank, as ever, my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the steam traction to my public railway. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.
Right, let's see. Detailed pieces. Sorry for that pause. I was reading a very important text message. But for an hour in, I feel like I'm doing all right.
Electrified. Ion. Hankook tire. This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and receive. Back in the day, shunting trucks was a dangerous job. Running alongside wagons, hooking chains, and checking brakes was tiring work. But in bigger yards, it was made much worse as shunters would have to walk miles just to get from one end to the other. To make life easier for shunters, however, the Great Western Railway decided that what they needed to do was give their shunters a wagon of their own. Before Britain's railways moved goods using shipping containers, freight would be loaded into individual trucks or vans, which would need to be organised into trains heading to their respective destinations. Hump yards allowed for wagons to be organised fairly quickly and efficiently, but as the trucks didn't have any kind of automatic brakes, workers were required to run alongside and apply the brakes manually to stop them from running away or from damaging other wagons by running into them too hard. They also had to couple together the wagons too once they were in place, all of this requiring them to carry brakes and various other tools while running around the yard. Smaller locomotives were also used around the yard to move trucks to their appropriate siding, and shunters often spent the day following engines, coupling and uncoupling.
Try to find a specific job.
Shunters would often move about by hanging onto moving trucks or hanging onto the locomotive's shunting truck. The problem was the trucks weren't designed to be ridden, and so it was very easy for shunters to lose their footing, fall off, and injure themselves. Drivers and firemen also weren't keen on letting shunters ride in their cabs either, as most shunting engines had very small footplates, leaving little room for a third passenger, meaning shunters either had to risk injuring themselves hanging off an engine or wagon, or suck it up and walk from one end of the yard to the other every time a wagon needed company. Seeing how their shunters needed a better way of carrying their tools and getting about, the Great Western Railway came up with a solution. Give the shunters their own wagon. Rather than bother the engine crew or hang off of wagons dangerously, they designed a special truck that would be coupled to the shunting engine as it worked. These trucks had footboards and rails for shunters to safely hang onto, as well as a toolbox fitted in the middle so shunters didn't have to constantly carry around their tools themselves.
I think I've screwed up a little bit here.
Having vacuum braking equipment fitted too, giving engine drivers a little more stopping power while moving heavier loads. The toolbox came with the added benefit of not just carrying shunting tools, but also chocks to stop trucks from rolling away, as well as ramps, lugs, and other equipment needed to re-rail wagons, minor derailments being something that was quite common in shunting yards. The first of the shunting wagons built by the Great Western Railway appeared in 1895, with 143 in use across the country by 1984. An additional 34 had been built by 1913, and another 119 were added to the fleet by the time the railways were nationalised in 1948, with British Railways building an extra 3 of their own. The amount of shunting trucks in each yard varied, with the average being 1 truck in service. Given their small size and limited versatility, it was rare these trucks ever left the yards they were allocated to. Other railways besides the Great Western built their own shunting wagons.
Got a whole bunch of because the tops have the detail, so I'm gonna have to grab a couple of these.
Modified tenders for use in specific yards, unlike the purpose-built GWR ones. Despite their utility, their relatively small size and lightweight did make them troublesome to work with. Drivers had to be mindful of the extra length the truck added to the engine for shunting, and their weight also meant they were fairly
See, red parts, there we go, they're in here.
They weren't exactly the most safe way for shunters
4.
But at the end of the day, shunters were still standing on the side of a moving wagon. All it'd take would be a sudden jerk from the engine or slipping on a wet, muddy rail for the shunter to fall and hurt themselves. Regardless of these shortcomings, however, their utility and convenience more than made up for it. The shunting trucks continued to be used on the western region of British railways for many years after the railways were nationalised, with some diesels even using them. But eventually, their usefulness came to an end. Many of the new Class 08 shunting diesels built by BR were fitted with steps and a rail near their front, which allowed shunters to ride on the engine as opposed to a wagon. While they didn't have the same convenient storage as a shunting truck, most shunters were used to not having shunting trucks anyway, so the lack of anywhere to keep re-railing tools and spare equipment wasn't much of a bother outside of Great Western Territory. Eventually, the switch over from individual wagons to shipping containers completely changed how shunting was done, and as such, shunting trucks were no longer needed. A handful, however, have been preserved and are on display at various heritage railways all across the country. Working on the railways was a hard job for everyone involved, but few jobs may have been as hard or as dangerous as the work of shunters. So the fact that the Great Western Railway went out of their way to make their lives so much easier must have certainly been a blessing. And I suppose, when you spend all day organising other people's trucks, it must be nice to have a truck of your own, eh? Subscribe for more.
Being a soldier is a career. You already know that. What you want to know is, what's in it for me? Becoming qualified in cyber defence, that's what was in it for me. Still smashing it for you.
Those adverts telling me to in the list.
In many countries, railways are comparable to veins in the human body, as they are a swift and efficient way of transporting both important supplies and people throughout its network. This also makes them vital in the development of countries and the industries within them. So why would anyone want to rip them up? There are three main reasons that spring to mind. 1, they become obsolete due to competing road traffic. 2, the line gets redirected a different way. Or 3, because of how essential they can be when it comes to transporting troops and supplies, it's obvious that railways provide a significant tactical advantage to any side that has them. And so destroying the lines or gaining control over them is an important tactical consideration.
I mean, very careful building this because I had to rip one of these up and I was doing the other side. I was so annoyed about it.
The railways were how Germany was able to move so many soldiers into French and Russian territory in order to control them. Obviously, they were way of rails in order to have an advantage over them. 2 notable ways this was done was during the American Civil War and the World Wars in Europe. During the US Civil War, General William Sherman ordered his soldiers to pull up Confederate rails, lay them on piles of wood, and burn them. Once heated enough to be malleable, the rails were to be twisted into a spiral shape. This was done as the Confederate Army had little iron supplies, and as such didn't have the resources to repair their railroads to the extent they were damaged. Most Union soldiers found the twisting method too tedious, so instead they'd heat the rails until malleable in the middle and bend them around trees, creating a loop shape. Once bent in this way, the rails were near impossible to straighten out without special equipment. Only one Confederate railroad leading to Atlanta remained 3 days after the order was given. These bent rails came to be known as Sherman's neckties, and was one of the main reasons the Union was able to hold against the Confederate Army. There are still a few on display at various Civil War museums. The second method of destruction was significantly more efficient. This entailed using a railroad plow. Essentially, a special wagon with a solid hook-shaped metal arm hanging off the back would be pulled along the line by a locomotive or attached to the back of a train. The hook would be lowered and dragged between the tracks, ripping the sleepers and distorting the rails. The first notable usage of them was in Russia during the First World War to prevent enemy forces from advancing through Poland. Some were used by the Czechoslovakian army in 1938 during German occupation, but the most notable uses were by Germany in the closing years of the war as part of the policies that were in place to keep back the pressing Russian and British forces.
just about formed the shape, at least of this one.
Greatly disturbed the ballast and rail bedding too, making it much harder to relay sturdy lines. As well as this, any bridges or signalling equipment these hooks passed over would be seriously damaged. While these hooks alone weren't enough to control troops advancing, they certainly slowed down enemy progress by a noteworthy amount. So when they were getting ready to invade an enemy country or simply want to stop an enemy from getting to you easily, remember to hit them where it hurts, right in the railways. Though it does seem a shame to ruin a perfectly good set of rails. I suppose war is good for nothing.
Well, I'll be right back.
On the 27th of November 1942, a German pilot was tasked with doing a sweep over the southeast coast of Britain. He climbed into his Focke-Wulf 190 and flew over to England, accompanied by another plane, with his main target being Ashford Railway Works, along with any other railway targets worth cannon shelling. The pilot was Heinz Beerwerth, a well-versed pilot with a few confirmed kills. After arriving over Hythe, he dropped several bombs, likely aimed at the Romney Hythe and Dymchurch railway station, and ended up killing a man after one of the shells exploded in his front room. After that, he fired many shells over Smeeth, damaging many points and signals essential in the shunting yard. He then attacked Ashford Railway Works, hitting 2 locomotives and killing one of the firemen. He also attacked a farm as he flew over King's North, striking a farmer in the leg. While not the most deadly attack, it was still pretty horrific for those caught up in the conflict. Don't worry though, he got his comeuppance in a very unexpected way. Charles Gilbert was an engine driver going about his work driving a train towards Lydd. The engine was an 044 tank engine numbered 2365, a former London, Brighton and South Coast D3 locomotive, and it was travelling down the line at a steady 25 miles an hour. It was a run-over-average day for Charles and his firemen, but neither could predict what would happen next. Beerwerth spotted the train, banked his plane and flew towards it, firing multiple shells into the engine. The damage caused steam to burst into the cab, which badly scalded the fireman, and the pressure in the boiler caused it to explode with enough force to rip off a large portion, funnel and all. At that moment, Beerwerth's plane was directly above the engine as it burst, launching a blast of steam and jagged metal into the plane, causing it to come down in a nearby field. Beerwerth was thrown from his plane as it crashed and was found dead, having drowned in the nearby dike he landed in. He was later buried with full military honours. The fireman was taken to hospital after suffering severe steam scalds, and Charlie Gilbert, the driver, was uninjured, albeit lightly shocked by the whole ordeal. The locomotive, ironically, had come from Ashford Yard, the same yard Beerwerth had attacked mere moments ago. It was repaired and eventually put back into service, working until 1953 when it was finally retired and scrapped. What happened to the driver and fireman, I don't know, but it's likely that both continued to work the railways until their retirements. Let there be a lesson to take from this. Never underestimate the power of a steam locomotive, or subsequently, the power of irony. As some of you may know, between 1939 and 1945, a large proportion of Europe decided to have a fight, and the rest of the world ended up getting dragged into it. Again. During this time, railways were essential in the transport of troops and supplies. During the outbreak of the war, Britain needed a standardized freight engine design that would be powerful, easy to maintain, and able to work on almost any stretch of line. The design used was William Stannier's 8F, used by the LMS. Hundreds were built to pick up the slack left by older or worn-out freight engines still in use, keeping everything moving like clockwork in an otherwise chaotic time. Some 8Fs were built to aid the British forces in France, but didn't arrive until the fall of France in 1940. They did find use elsewhere, however, aiding troops all over the Middle East. Not every railway was equipped to handle the sudden influx of troops and supplies, and as such, more locomotive power was needed. More 8Fs were built and shipped overseas to Egypt, Iran, Turkey, and Palestine, having cowcatchers, headlamps, and different couplers added to follow with railway regulations. Some were even modified with differently balanced wheels of motion to allow them to reach higher top speeds. A few engines never even made it to their intended destinations, with many being lost at sea during transportation. The ones that did make it worked hard and made a name for themselves among the workers of the railways they ran on. 42 wound up in Egypt, with an additional 142 working in Iran, 20 in Turkey, and some belonging to the Middle East forces being sent to Palestine and Israel in 1942. The 8Fs served their purpose, shunting and moving supplies, but it was clear in some areas that the engines weren't designed to work in these foreign environments. The engines running in Egypt had trouble keeping their water tanks full due to the scarcity of water. On top of this, smoke and steam from the engine over the desert landscape made them very easy to spot by enemy aircraft, making them easy targets. When America sent diesels to aid Egypt, the 8Fs were quickly set aside for less essential duties. A similar story happened in Iran. With the engines finding it difficult to work effectively in the desert weather, they were quickly put aside once American diesels arrived to help with the war effort. The ones sent to Turkey managed to find work as short-distance good engines and shunters, despite them being designed with long distance in mind. This was due to the engine's limited capacity for coal and water, and overall incompatibility with Turkey's railway infrastructure compared to the engines already in use. Despite this, they still worked hard, staying in use on Turkish state railways well into the 1980s. The 8Fs served the British forces well, but by 1943, Robert Riddle's austerity designs proved to be cheaper and more adaptable than the 8Fs, and as such became the new favourite standard freight design used throughout the UK, as well as being sent to Greece, the Netherlands, America, and even as far as Hong Kong. By the time the war was over, 10 8Fs were purchased by Iraqi state railways, more than 24 were under ownership of Palestine railways, 62 were operating on Egyptian state railways, 22 in Iran, and 15 had managed to find their way all the way to Italy. More than 39 engines found their way back to England, but not all were immediately fit for service. Many were worn out or in need of modifying back to their original state. Number 8233 had derailed while in Persia and had been converted to burn oil in 1944. It was in a poor state when it came back in 1952, and so it was overhauled at Derby Works before being put to work on the Longmoor Military Railway before finally retiring to the Severn Valley Railway. Most of the engines that stayed abroad were scrapped in their respective countries once they became redundant, with a handful still stored in sidings waiting to either be cut up or preserved. Their legacy does still live on in the countries they worked in, with 4 preserved in Turkey at the Çamlık Railway Museum, Sincan Railway Station, and Izmit Old Railway Station respectively, with number 45166 on display at the Beersheva Railway Station, restored to how it looked while running on Israel railways. One remains in Baghdad awaiting formal preservation, with another dumped somewhere in Kankiri. 2 of the Turkish 8Fs were brought back home, the first being number 8247 in 1989, currently residing at the Great Central Railway. The other being number 45170, which was purchased alongside number 45166 by the Churchill F8 Trust. Number 45170 currently resides at the Bowness and Kinneil Railway, awaiting overhaul, having been named Sir William McAlpine, while number 45166 was cosmetically restored and sent back to Turkey on display at Beersheva. Overall, the 8Fs were a vital part of the war effort, and despite them not entirely running smoothly on foreign rails, still managed to do the heavy lifting they were designed to do, working on Turkish, Iraqi, Iranian, Palestinian, Israeli, Egyptian, and even Italian railways long after they were needed by the war effort. Despite their shortcomings, they really were the right engine for the job. So next time you happen to see one at your local heritage railway, search up the engine's number, and you might find it's travelled a lot further than you thought. During the Second World War, Turkey was trying to remain neutral in order to keep out of the conflict in Europe. Around 1941, Germany tried to gain Turkey's favour by providing them with some resources, including some DRB Class 42 steam locomotives for use on their railways. Britain, not wanting more trouble, offered Turkey 25 LMS Stania 8Fs and a few other things for them to remain neutral. The 8Fs were being used by the War Department for heavy freight work, so Churchill felt they would be a fitting gift. So why are 2 of them at the bottom of the sea? In June of 1941, a ship called the SS Thistlegorm departed from Glasgow that was destined for Egypt, carrying armoured vehicles, motorcycles, Bren guns, cases of ammunition, radio equipment, Wellington boots, aircraft parts, railway wagons, and 2 LMS Stania Class 8Fs. The locomotives were to be unloaded in Egypt and delivered to Turkey by land. Because of the Germans' and Italians' control over the Mediterranean Sea, the Thistlegorm had to go all the way around Africa, stopping at Cape Town to refuel before sailing into the Red Sea in a convoy of several other Navy ships. Because of a collision at the Suez Canal, the ship couldn't reach Alexandria, so it was ordered to point close to Ras Mohammed. German intelligence suspected a ship full of reinforcements was on the way, so 2 planes were dispatched to find and destroy the troop carrier. As there was no troop carrier, the planes decided to bomb the largest ship in the fleet, this being the Thistlegorm. The bombs hit hole number 4, and the resulting explosion from the bombs and ammunition stored led to the ship sinking. Most of the cargo remained inside the ship as it sank, apart from the 2 locomotives that were on the top deck. Both were blown off of either side of the ship and came to rest on the ocean floor, with one of them believed to have been directly struck by a bomb. The ship was mostly forgotten until 1990, when the area became a diving resort. The ship is only 30 meters or so underwater, meaning it can be accessed without special training or specialist gear, making it a great diving spot for tourists. Both locomotives rest either side of the ship, now acting as underwater attractions and home for the local fish, albeit rusty and covered in aquatic life. By 1950, the First World War was really beginning to heat up. More and more countries were becoming tangled up in the bloodshed, and it wouldn't be long before the entire globe would be at each other's throats. Many Europeans who'd moved abroad desperately wanted to fight for their countries, or help turn the tide in their favour by committing acts of espionage. However, as it turned out, not everyone who wanted to help was quite cut out to be a spy. After Britain joined the war in 1914, many other countries that were part of the British Empire also ended up joining shortly after and aiding in the front lines. When Japan also joined the war shortly after as an ally of Britain, Germany began to get concerned. As Canada was part of the British Empire, not only could they send their own troops and supplies, but also help transport Japanese troops from the Pacific across Canada, where they could join Canadian troops on their way to the Western Front. Germany was convinced this was going to happen, and as such ordered the Canadian railway system be disrupted. This order was answered by Mr. Werner Horn, a German Army Reserve lieutenant who'd been managing a coffee plantation in Guatemala. He had tried to return to Germany at the outbreak of the war, but ended up stuck in New York due to the British blockade of the North Sea. As his old plantation had found a new manager, he found work at another plantation in Chiapas before getting a card officially ordering him to return to Germany in December. On his way back, he met Franz von Papen in New York, the military attaché of the German embassy in Washington. Papen had formulated a plan to sabotage the St. Croix-Vanceboro railway bridge that crossed the border between Canada and the US, and was looking for willing volunteers to do it. The US was strictly neutral during the outbreak of the war, having forbid Canada from transporting troops or wartime supplies through US soil. The Canadian Pacific was still allowed to use their line traveling through Maine. Despite using it to carry troops and supplies, because they weren't being loaded or unloaded on US soil, the US simply turned a blind eye. Many in Germany objected to this practice, but the complaints seemed to fall on deaf ears. Papen butted up Horn by telling him destroying the bridge would be viewed as an act of valor in Germany, and that he'd be a hero for disrupting enemy supply lines while not having to kill anyone. On top of this, despite being a major supply route, the bridge was unguarded as nobody expected a little nowhere to be a significant military target. Horn was sold, and so Papen paid him $700 to destroy the bridge. Horn had never received any official kind of training to be a spy, but figured how hard could it be? And in late January of 1915, he put the plan into action. He acquired a load of dynamite, which he packed into a suitcase and hopped aboard an overnight train to Boston, which continued to Maine. I would like to stress that not only was he carrying dynamite on a passenger train, but he also slept with it in his bed compartment on the trip. When he arrived in Vanceboro, he checked into a nearby hotel and got straight to work. And he raised suspicion when he was spotted hiding the suitcase in a pile of wood before scouting out the bridge. After 3 Vanceboro residents reported the suspicious behavior, he was questioned by a US immigration inspector. Horn informed the inspector he was merely a Danish farmer looking to buy land in the area, and spent the next 2 days laying low and keeping a note of the Canadian Pacific schedule. Once he had all the information he needed, he was ready to do that. Later night, on the 1st of February 1915, he checked out of his hotel saying he needed to catch a train, and set off for the bridge. He changed into a German army uniform to prevent himself from being labelled as a spy in the event he got caught, an offence he could be executed. As prepared as he was to pull off the bombing, what he wasn't prepared for was the weather. Not only was it extremely cold that night, with temperatures as low as minus 34 degrees Celsius, but extremely windy too. He reached the bridge around midnight and got ready to set the explosives in place, only to be interrupted by a train thundering past. He waited for a moment for it to be all clear before continuing to work on the explosives, only to be interrupted again by yet another trap. Despite being an enemy spy willing to fight for the fatherland, armed with roughly 60 pounds of dynamite and about to destroy enemy infrastructure, really didn't want to hurt anyone with this explosion. As such, he waited a while in the freezing gale to make sure no more trains were coming before continuing. It was 7 minutes past 1 in the morning by the time he had placed the bomb. He cut the fuse and lit it with a cigar.
We put this up, we build it up like this. You put these circular bits in here, these arches, and then the pins, and then we should be good from there.
As the horn had cut the fuse, the dynamite exploded after only 3 minutes at 10 past 1, blowing out windows across Vansborough and St. Croix, exposing many residents to the cold, harsh winds outside. The blast was so powerful, it left the bridge relatively intact. Only a few iron beams were twisted out of shape. Upon inspection the next day, the damage to the bridge was found to be relatively minor. Frankly, the bomb seemed to have caused more damage to its surroundings than to its target. It didn't take long for the hotel proprietor to connect the explosion, with Horn reappearing in the middle of the night, half frozen. The sheriff of Vansborough and 2 Canadian police officers detained Horn at the hotel. Horn having changed into his uniform again to prevent spy charges. As he was arrested on US soil, he was tried by the US courts first, where he signed a confession. As the explosion happened on the Canadian side of the bridge, the most the court could charge him with was carrying explosives on a public train. He was sentenced to 18 months in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in Georgia. Afterwards, he was extradited to Canada in 1919, where he was tried for attempting to blow up the bridge. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but was released and sent back to Germany in 1921 after being deemed insane. In reality, he was suffering from syphilis. What happened to him afterwards isn't really known. The bridge, meanwhile, was only out of service for a few days before it was quickly repaired. Not only was Horn's attempt to serve the fatherland a fantastic demonstration of how not to be a spy, but in the long term led to the US cracking down on possible German spies. The fact Von Papen, an official German ambassador, managed to orchestrate this entire
so
despite being neutral,
that's been done, right.
helping German spies orchestrate attacks on Canada. Eventually, the US started sending supplies to the Allied countries and finally joined the war in 1917. Looking back, Werner Horn's attempt to blow up the Vansborough Bridge is frankly a comical example that not everybody is cut out to be a spy. From carrying explosives in public to getting caught several times acting suspiciously to failing to achieve his goal in the first place, it'd be fair to say he wasn't exactly the best the fatherland had to offer in terms of espionage ability. So remember, if you're ever offered the chance to get in on some secretive spying skullduggery, maybe think twice before playing James Bond, as you may end up acting a bit more Austin Powers. Running locomotives from different countries on other railways always come to its drawbacks. Sometimes problems during the flow of the loading age, the engines not having enough fuel capacity for the distances they're expected to travel, or simply just being incompatible with the railway's infrastructure because they weren't designed to run on it in the first place. There were, however, some locomotives that went on to not only worked well, but practically Army Transportation Corps designed and ordered
try to find an exact angle for it.
They arrived in the UK in 1943 and were sent to continental Europe in 1944 after D-Day. Their work, shunting and helping organise freight and goods led them to be scattered all over Europe. By the end of the war, they were being used in Austria, Britain, France, Greece, Italy, the Netherlands, and even as far as China. Their short wheelbase allowed them to negotiate some of the tightest curves. Their tanks and bunkers gave
Right, popping it up the right way again.
short-distance goods trains, and they could be easily converted to burn oil instead of coal. Their simple design and adaptability meant there were few railways where they couldn't work. After the war, while some were no longer needed and either scrapped or sent back to the US, many found that the engines of their respective countries. 77 were purchased by France's National Railway, 1 acquired by Greece, 4 by Italy, 10 by Austria, 2 by China, and 15 by Southern Railway.
But the size of these pieces is just like, there's my hand. Just if it's hard to explain the scale of this model.
The engines weren't by any means flawless, though. They were complicated for it took some lines of while to adapt using the American-style controls. All the railways had to spend money adapting the controls. Best thought one could make that unless time was spent modifying them, they had to refit frequently. The axle boxes are yards would get altered if the engine travelled for prolonged periods of time, meaning they could only be used on short journeys. And finally, while their short wheelbase made them ideal shunters, it also made them prone to swiveling at high speeds, causing them to damage the rails if drivers weren't careful. As such, some railways took it upon themselves to build their own versions of the S100. Yugoslavian Railway built an additional 20 locomotives to go with the S100 system. Poland built 437 engines with a similar design, sending them to China. Even the Great Western Railway in the UK built their own engines with a similar design, with limited success. All in all, despite having different teething troubles, the S100 showed their worth not only in the time necessity, but many duties served alongside it as well. For 100 of these engines still exist today, either preserved, restored, or laid derelict.
Maybe I've got more these in another box somewhere.
Show its worth despite being built in a country that has a specific way of life.
Oh yeah, there's more of these in here.
Even with their initial compatibility issues, are a prime example that just because something doesn't exactly fit the bill, doesn't mean it won't get the job done. I think we can all agree that planned obsolescence is infuriating. Something deliberately designed to break down after a few years of service requiring you to replace it. But have you ever seen the opposite, where something intended to be disposable has kept going well past its service life? Because in the case of the S160s, that's exactly
I'm trying to do this without blocking the view.
A deal was made to provide Britain with 200 S159 class locomotives for use in the Middle East, as well as additional aid. But that soon changed once the US officially joined the war in December 1941. To help with efforts in Europe, Major M.J. Marsh designed a locomotive for use on European railways, using aspects of the S159 while keeping it within Britain's very restrictive loading gauge. The end result was a 280-tender engine that was powerful, cheap to build, could be easily converted to burn oil. The tenders were designed to make them easier to run in reverse and were relatively straightforward to modify to meet the needs of whatever railway they ran on. Pleased with the design, the United States Army Transportation Corps ordered Baldwin, Lima, and Alco to start building. Classified as S160s, the first batch arrived in Britain in 1942. They were meant to be kept in storage for later deployment into mainland Europe, but 400 of them ended up being into service by the US, UNER, Great Western, and Southern Railways to keep up with demand and fill in for damaged locomotives, with another batch of 400 arriving and being put into storage. Some modifications had to be made to help improve the locomotive's compatibility with Britain's railways, such as trimming 9.5 millimeters off the inside of the wheel's flanges. The alterations to the wheels did help provide a smoother ride. However, the flanges were still thin compared to those on British engines, often causing the S160s to pick points and derail. And the wheels weren't the only issue. Thanks to all the corners cut to make the engines fast and cheap to build, their axle box lubricators were substandard, often leading to axle boxes being dropped if not frequently maintained. Another issue was their controls.
Let me find what box I've got. Yep, I found it. It has the arches. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
The stay bolts were found to be easy to fatigue because of the quick turnaround times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. even more was the water gauge in the key. British crews were unfamiliar with the American clinker design that required both keys to be opened slowly to the engine. If done correctly, the water trapped in the gauge and show a voltage, showing the water level to be fine when in reality it was dangerously low. If the water got too low, the crown should overheat, causing the stay bolts to fail, resulting in a sudden further explosion. Between November of
7 and 8.
1944, there were 3 S-160s that suffered firebox ground collapses, resulting in one fireman losing his life. On top of that, compared to the austerity engines already in use in Britain, both the Stania 8F and Reynolds' 280 austerity, the S-160s were slightly heavier, slightly less powerful, and much more awkward for crews to handle.
So these all kind of help with the shaping at the top of the model, kind of where you've got, because obviously these are access, like, I don't know, like maintenance access hatches, like something like that.
The other 400 that had been used on British rails were repaired and dispatched shortly afterwards.
So it kind of adds to the curvature in there.
Themselves all over the world. In Europe, working on nearly every railway from Spain to the Soviet Union. In Africa, they operated around Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria, with most of them eventually moving to Italy. And in Asia, they worked in India, China, and both North and South Korea. Some engines were specially built in the US with wider axles to run on the broad gauge lines of Russia and India. Many footplate crews had teething problems with the engines, just like in Britain, but this was understandable given the S-160s were built as temporary motive power and weren't tailored to every railway. After the war was over, the engines remained in Europe to help rebuild until 1946.
But yeah, it's not gonna be transformed this evening like completely, but it will look better than it did. As long as my goal with these streams is as long as it looks different from how it did before, like visibly, then I'm happy.
Many settled into life working in Poland, Italy, Turkey, Hungary took the most units, 510 in total. These have been extensively modified to make them more compatible with Hungarian railways, such as having new brakes fitted.
Just getting these top bits. Right, there we go. So I can add these in. So from once I put these kind of smooth tile bits on, I believe we are done like anything to this that is structural. There'll be like all the detailed parts added.
They continued to work in India well into the late 1970s.
So I've decided I'm probably not. I mean, I doubt it anyway. But I'm going to try and do the bit that goes above this. Not above this, the main kind of center line of the Falcon. We've already got the bottom bit for it there, but I don't see myself doing that top bit.
6 survive in Greece, 2 in Italy, 2 in Turkey, 3 in Poland, 3 in Hungary with the flag key plus the boiler, 6 in the UK with the additional 2 Restream for spares, and 8 managed to make their way back home to the US on display at various museums across the country. The S-160s then certainly stand out among many other engines in preservation, not only because of their American style contrasting with many of the European designs they're often displayed alongside, but the fact they lasted so long on railways they weren't 100% equipped to operate on while being built to be disposable. Let this be a reminder then that even if something isn't built to last, that doesn't mean it can't do things.
I think what I'll do with the rest of this live is, because it'll be 2 hours probably by the time I'm done that, is I'll build the other mandibles top plates, and then after that we'll probably end it. I think that's what we'll do. And it means if I do take those breaks, those few days where I don't do a live and then come back, it means I'll be back fresh to tackle the ship's cockpit as well as some other things. Right, there we go. So now it's built. It's a case of detail parts.
Railways have been around for a long time. Naturally, in times of war, attempts have been made to weaponize railways, and nothing was more effective on a railway than simply bolting a heavy cannon that would be otherwise impractical to move around to a flatbed and using the railway to push it about. Over time, these cannons got bigger until eventually four naval-grade cannons were being mounted for use on railways. While effective for destroying long-range targets, their accuracy was often limited by the direction of the track, and they were very cumbersome to move around, often requiring tracks to be specially laid in order for them to hit a target. Despite this, the ability to move...
So yeah, just detailing them, because also the bottoms have like a small amount of detail, really just tiling. But that's because I suppose, like, even if well, there's people who made stands back in the day for custom displaying it, but most people who display it just display this on its feet.
...to be able to fire shells powerful enough to penetrate meters of thick reinforced concrete while far enough away from the front lines to be out of the range of French artillery. Krupp of Essen, one of Germany's most prolific engineering companies, was set with the task of designing and building the weapon. Engineer Erich Müller calculated the gun would have to fire a shell roughly 80 centimeters in diameter and nearly 7 tons in weight. As the company had other projects to attend to, the weapon was somewhat put on a back burner until 1976.
Got to find a couple things.
No definite answer was given, but the Inquisition did lead to the project taking up a priority spot in the company. By early 1997, the designs for the gun were finalized and construction of the weapon was set into motion. In order to fire the desired shells, the main barrel of the gun needed to be 32.5 meters long, with an equally large frame to mount the gun onto. Due to the complexity of fabricating a single barrel of such a size, the actual cannon part of the weapon wouldn't be completed until 1940. In the meantime, a test model was built in 1939 and trialed at the Hillesley.
And that is it. That is the panel.
Managed to fire a 7-ton shell through 7 meters of concrete and 1 meter of solid armor plating. Pleased with the results, 2 of these cannons were ordered by German High Command. Once the first gun was completed in 1941, it was properly trialed in Rügenwalde, now Darlowo, Poland, where the gun was found to have an effective range of 40 kilometers with a maximum range of 47. To put that into perspective, it could have...
You're not camping. Very interesting response. Or thing to say in general.
The cannon's newly fabricated chassis were packed up and shipped off to battle in 1942, having been given the name Schwere Gustav, or Heavy Gustav, named after the senior director of the firm, Gustav Krupp. As France was already under German occupation, the gun was sent east towards Russia to aid on the Eastern Front. The gun arrived in Crimea to aid the German forces during the siege of Sevastopol. Before the gun could be assembled and fired, however, the German forces had to lay down a short section of railway line connected to the main line they were using to transport Gustav. This not only included the rails Gustav would be sat on, but also additional rails for the cranes required to assemble the gun to rest on too. It took 4,000 men 5 weeks to lay down the rails, assemble the gun, and get it into firing position, requiring a crew of 500 men alone to operate and fire it. Once assembled, the world was introduced to the force of nature that was Schwere Gustav. The entire construction was of a length of 47 meters, a height of 11.6 meters, and weighed at tons. To put that into perspective, here is the Flying Scotsman, here is a Union Pacific Big Boy, and here is Gustav. These were the shells it was firing, which weighed 7 metric tons each. The average male African bush elephant weighs 6 metric tons. Long story short, this thing was a mobile building that had the power to fire an earth-shattering payload over 40 kilometers away with
Okay then.
sharp accuracy.
Whatever you say.
Truly a force to be feared. The siege had been going on for months at this point, with Soviet forces managing to hold control over the city thanks to the many underground bunkers and fortifications they had. Conventional assault, as well as aerial and naval bombardment, proved to be ineffective against the reinforced bunkers and forts, and so it was up to Gustav to destroy these fortifications, something it was more equipped to do. The gun was used from the 5th to the 17th of June, firing a total of 47 rounds. By the 4th of July, the siege was over, and Sevastopol was practically razed to the ground, with both bunkers, underground or overground, effectively destroyed. Gustav was then dismantled and moved on to the eastern front, being gathered roughly 30 kilometers away from Leningrad, ready to be used to help storm the city. Despite the gun being good to go, the attack was cancelled, and the gun remained there until early 1943. Meanwhile, the second cannon, after the siege,
Try to get this bit done a bit quicker. Because I'm going to go to bed immediately after this.
Also positioned with the intention of aiding in an assault on the city. Back in Germany, development of another railway gun was well underway, known as the Langer Gustav. This gun would have had a longer barrel than the Gustav and fired a narrower caliber of shell intended for longer distance, giving it an effective range of 190 kilometers. In a poor turn of fate for the Germans, the cannon was severely damaged during construction thanks to several bombing raids made by the RAF. At this point, it isn't entirely known what happened to either of the cannons, as neither of them...
Build's going good. We're just doing some of the top paneling, because that's one of the mandibles there. I've got 3 of these, and these are all underneath panels. And I'm going to show you something cool at the end of the live if you stick around, like where I've put it, because you'll notice it's not there. I've already started playing about with where it's going, and it looks good.
Set up in time to act as a defense against the advancing Allied forces, and even if they could, they would look to destroy bunkers, not small, mobile targets like advancing convoys or aircraft. On the 14th of April 1945, Gustav was destroyed to prevent it from being captured by the approaching US troops, with its remains being found 8 days later by said US troops in a forest roughly a few kilometers away from Dachau. Dora was blown up shortly afterwards on the 19th, also captured. Debris from both guns was taken and studied by Soviet engineers, but little useful information was gained from it. As large and impractical as they were, Gustav and Dora were both frighteningly powerful weapons that luckily never got to fully show off what they were capable of. I remind you, these things could easily pierce a 7-meter thick reinforced barrier from 39 kilometers away. Overall, while it wasn't a terrifyingly powerful weapon the Germans were packing, we can be thankful they were at least underutilized. Because to be able to annihilate a target from so far away...
Perhaps I'll post a TikTok of what it's looking like.
Let's just say that it's certainly a frightening example of German engineering at its most brutal.
There's no peace of mind if the
I'd go grab it, but the mere size of the build makes it unliftable majority of the time. It's one of those sets that mostly stays on the shelf, but will occasionally be brought down for, whatever reason.
Okay, I see you. Okay, let me see you, Cherry Hill. Yeah, now take it back. Let me see you.
Many people over the years have tried many different ways of making steam locomotives more efficient. Everything from using different fuels to different body shapes and boiler types. In Italy, one-way designers thought they could make steam locomotives was by simply adding another boiler.
Right.
Which, surprisingly, worked.
Just getting it shaped together.
Water in the boiler is heated into steam, which then flows to its cylinders to create movement before being exhausted. Because the used steam is exhausted, over time the water in the boiler will deplete, and so footplate will need to keep topping it up with water carried in the engine's tanks. The problem is, this water is usually cold, and as a result, when injected into the boiler, the cold water decreases the temperature in the rest of the boiler, which lowers the boiler's pressure, which then the engine in order to get the now colder boiler back up to temperature. In the ideal world, computing into the boiler as hot as possible to decrease the amount of energy needed to boil it. It's a problem many engineers have tried to tackle since the very early days of steam. This led to many weak feed water heaters. Heating the pipe the water is injected through, while others involve blasting steam from the boiler into the engine's water tanks. For many Italian railways, however, this wasn't enough. Unlike Britain or Germany, to operate its railways. Railways wanted to reduce the amount of coal their locomotives consumed to save money. In the early 1910s, Attilio Franco designed the Franco boiler, a system designed to preheat a locomotive's feed water using its exhaust gases. Rather than being exhausted from the locomotive's funnel, spent steam and gases from the firebox would instead flow through what was essentially an additional boiler. This would heat up the feed water before it was then injected into the main boiler. Using the exhaust gases to preheat the water ensured as little energy as possible was being wasted and helped the engine get the most out of its fuel. Franco's design, however, wasn't used until 1932 for the quadruplex locomotive built in Belgium. It being fitted with two Franco preheaters mounted in front of the main locomotive's boilers. Italy didn't start experimenting with Franco's design until 1937, when a cab-forward Class 670 locomotive was modified and fitted with a preheater on its tender. After several trial runs, the engine showed rest of the class. Though the engine was discovered this time, Attilio Franco passed away, and development of the design was taken over by Dr. Piero Crosti, leading to the system becoming known as the Franco Crosti boiler. Crosti furthered the design in 1939 by modifying 5 FS Class 685 engines by adding 2 smaller preheaters that would be positioned in the locomotive's boiler. One at the front, giving them an appearance of boxes and exhaust mounted both sides of the boiler. These were classified as 683s, given special streamlined casings for passenger services. Like the 670 before them, the streamlined cases were used for aesthetic purposes only. Crosti's changes were successful, with the 683s proving to be 18.9 more economical in their fuel usage compared to their Class 685 counterparts. Though it's worth noting the 683s also had an improved boiler design compared to the 685s, so not all of their success and efficiency can be attributed to the Franco Crosti system. The Italian State Railway seeing fuel consumption, they built 94 new
that was smart.
the Franco Crosti system in 1940, classified as 743s, followed by several other classes being modified and fitted with new boilers both during and after the Second World War. As Franco Crosti boilers proved to be favoured in Italy, it wasn't long before other railways across Europe experimented with the system too. In 1948, a 280 engine in Spain was modified and fitted with a Franco Crosti boiler. Unlike its Italian counterparts, however, it was fitted with only one preheater, which was mounted under the boiler. Even more unusual is its exhaust supposedly travelled through the middle of the engine's boiler. Why it was put in such an impractical place is beyond me. West Germany followed suit, equipping 2 Class 52s with preheaters also under their boilers in 1951. By 1958, Germany had fitted feed water heaters onto 31.
My goal is by the 2 hour and 5 minute mark to have this done, and then by 2 hours and 15 minutes have the internal part of this done. Also, not internal. Have all these parts of assembled for the live stream, which will be 5 different sections attached to the main body.
The 9Fs were already some of the best steaming engines in Britain, and while the Franco Crosti heaters did provide a slight boost in performance, it was hard to justify fitting more engines with them, especially given how complicated they were to maintain. That brings us on to some of the drawbacks of the Franco Crosti boiler, and why every railway this did help with weight distribution, it did mean the engine's boiler and cab would have to be raised to compensate, often leading to issues with the engine's overall height. Fitting it in front of an engine smoke box like earlier designs would help with both weight and height, but at the cost of making the engine longer. Secondly was maintenance. Many Franco-Cross designs suffer from corrosion due to the buildup of acidic flue gases in the feed water heater. These needed to be frequently replaced to keep them operating. This, combined with the extra hassle of cleaning what was essentially another boiler, only added to turnaround times and maintenance costs. It's also worth noting that some engines fitted with these feed water heaters also had to be fitted with boilers to accommodate them. As a result, some engines like the 9Fs ended up being less powerful than their unmodified counterparts. Most railway engineers took note of this, and instead just focused on making the locomotive's boilers more efficient instead of adding these preheaters. And finally, the biggest reason why the Franco-Cross didn't really take off outside of Italy was because high-grade coal wasn't as scarce in the rest of Europe. As I said earlier, Italy had to import most of its coal, and because of how costly this was, railways were eager to reduce the amount of fuel their engines burned to save money. Meanwhile, in countries like Germany and Britain, high-grade coal was a plentiful resource, and as such, fitting and maintaining Franco-Cross heaters would likely end up more expensive than paying the difference for the coal. Simply put, for all the benefits and savings in fuel the Franco-Cross boilers provided, they were held back by their excessive weight, excessive maintenance, with other, more conventional feed water heat. The fact that only a relatively small number of Italian locomotives were fitted with Franco-Cross boilers, despite their success, shows they weren't always an automatic upgrade for every engine. The engines that were improved, however, did go on to have a full working life, some operating as late as the 1980s, with a handful making their way into preservation. The Franco-Cross boilers then, while not as major of an improvement as they seemed on paper, did prove to be quite a boon for Italian railways, even if many other countries didn't have as much use for them. Subscribe for more.
Let's see. So we're now on to doing the top of this, and then just got to do them clips.
Trains are heavy things, and the ground dipping just a little bit can be enough to cause an engine to derail at speeds. And some consistency. There have been cases of rails shifting out of place. Many people over the
1 second, just bring something on.
experimenting is one of the most important things we can do. Mixing things and testing different outcomes has allowed us to figure out how things work and how to make the most of them. Railways are no different. When British Rail was experimenting with diesel power in the 1960s, they learned the hard way not only how to do things right, but also how to do them very wrong. With the modernisation scheme underway, British Rail was experimenting with various diesel locomotive designs to find an ideal standard design for their Type 1 engines. The Type 1s were to be low-power machines designed for light goods work and passenger services on the main line, and the Class 20s were found to be an ideal standard design. The only issue was the positioning of their cabs. Being set at one end of the locomotive gave the driver a clear view ahead when driving cab forwards, but it was almost impossible for the driver to see when travelling in the opposite direction. The locomotive turned around, or the driver to operate actively blind. Naturally,
Right.
money.
A couple more bits to do.
So, in 1962, they began looking for locomotive builders who could meet their specifications. One of the companies to get was the British Equipment Company. They came up with a design where the cab would be set directly in the middle of the locomotive's body, with small engine compartments on either side, allowing the driver to clearly see over them. British Rail was interested and went forwards with the Clayton design, ordering 117 from the company. Attention to the standard type
1, 2,
in order to
3,
achieve the
and
same
4.
locomotives were fitted with two smaller engine blocks as opposed to one big one like most other diesel electrics at the time. Each locomotive had a pair of 6-cylinder Paxman 6Z HXL engines, with 2 units being fitted with Rolls-Royce engines instead. Their transmission was electric, with one engine big enough to power all 4 traction motors that drove the wheels. The cab was equipped with 2 sets of controls, one facing in each direction, as well as many other quality-of-life features, such as a fire suppression system in the
3,
engine bays,
4, 5,
systems
6,
that
7,
monitored fluid levels, the engines were
8.
balanced through vibrations, lifting brackets were fitted to make maintenance easier, and they were even designed so that steam heating boilers could be fitted in their cabs, allowing them to pull passenger services. Clayton really did go out of their way to make these engines the best they could be. Engines, while Bayer Peacock built the remaining 29. Measuring in at 50 foot 7.5 inches long.
This help get the shape, so when you're looking at it top down, it has that circular shape for these. From what I understand, these are maintenance access ports.
The first batch being completed in 1962 and put to work around Scotland and the north of England.
But yeah, I'll give the bits I've already done will look more complete, especially that underside. Because to the best of my knowledge, yes, it's taken to live stream number 6, but we'll have done the underside.
As well as the southern, but it turned out the amazing visibility they promised came with some drawbacks. To start with, the engines were notorious for failing, suffering from camshaft and cylinder issues, as well as their crankcases fracturing. The Rolls-Royce engine blocks failing so spectacularly that they were quickly replaced with the Paxman engines. Within a year of them being introduced, they were already being put to one side while efforts were made to repair and rectify their engine issues. Because of this, steam engines had to be borrowed from other parts of the network, and some withdrawn engines were even pressed back into service to fill in for the 17s. Even when they did work, their lack of power made them practically useless for the goods work they were intended to do, even when working in multiple unit formations. Their low power left the Class 17 stuck working on light goods and moving out to passenger stock, a far shout from the mainline goods machines they were meant to be. The Paxman engines were originally built for use in diesel rail cars and chosen because they were small, making it much easier to see over them. But given other, more powerful engines were readily available, this choice is very questionable. The choice to have 2 separate engines as well made them much more expensive and time-consuming to maintain, making them a massive
Plates on, these just help with the friction of when it is attached to the other panels. Obviously, they're already there. Because that is pretty much hollow inside the mandibles, apart from the few detailed parts which will stick out from these holes.
Because of the twin engine layout, the Class 17s were impossible to standardize, further making them incompatible with the rest of the yard stock. But the most damning thing about the Class 17s was their entire selling point, their cab visibility. The bonnets at either end greatly blocked the driver's view, ironically making it harder to see directly ahead of the locomotive, despite better visibility being the entire reason the small engines and cab layout were chosen in the first place. While the view was much better than most compared to something like the Class 20s,
Just reconnecting. Hopefully this live is still viewable afterwards. Yeah, it's going alright.
The 17s were so bad that after the last batch was completed in 1965, it took only 3 years for the first of them to be withdrawn in 1968, with the last going in 1971. A handful were put to one side with the intention of converting them to battery power, but this never came to fruition, and they were all eventually scrapped. Miraculously, despite their awful track record, one has survived into preservation, having been purchased for use as a shunter by the Harpenden Cement Company, later working for Ribble Cement in Clitheroe, before being preserved by the Chinnor and Princess Risborough Railway. Experimentation is a vital part of the learning process. We never truly know if something will or will not work unless we try it. But let the Class 17s be a reminder that while not every experiment is success, that doesn't mean we can't still learn a few things from our failures, no matter how embarrassing they are. Subscribe.
We're all busy. Busy taking notes, busy making notes, busy turning long-winded summaries into something a little more digestible, please. Busy closing loops, busy writing back, busy crafting the perfect response, busy applying or busy optimizing, synthesizing on.
Just getting these last bits onto this panel. These panels are huge. The scale of this set is I'm still comprehending.
Welcome to Under the Hotspots, the series serving up some of the hottest food scenes from across the UK, one city at a time. And here we are in sunny Brighton, the beating heart of queer celebration, and we're going to check out some of the boldest, most flavour-packed spots for you to try while you're here this Pride weekend. First up on the tour is Beelzebub, a punk.
Right, so essentially there's a couple pages afterwards. Well, one page afterwards has a few extra details on top once they're on the build as it connects it into the build. So essentially, I'll pause this. We've got this panel, this panel, this one, and this one. All need to join the rest of the build. Just clearing some things away. Make this process a little bit less painful. So, yeah. I'm going to bring the Falcon down, which is not exactly the easiest thing. It's not an easy set to move, but a lot of the UCS sets, the modern ones, are, I'll give them credit, can be slightly better to move. There we go. Frame. So essentially what we're doing is attaching all the things we got. So figure out the difference between those two. Right, okay. So this is that other one that goes up the back. So this one here. So maybe a bit difficult on the angles. Again, hopefully I'm at that point where everything else I'm putting on is assembled separate. Which it is looking that way, which means I'll have the freedom. See, one of these is meant to be differently designed. Right. Right, so the one with the stripes goes at the back. Cool. This all it means when you're looking at it top down, it'll be pretty much almost perfect. Trying to get in there to put it on is slightly annoying. One other option we can take advantage of is I can swivel it and have the. So I'll be making sure I'm keeping a majority of the landing gear actually on the table when doing this. Right. That is not playing ball. These bits just keep folding in. And they move independently from each other, which I don't think's helping. Try a wee trick. I'll put the pins in. If I sort the pins out and put them in and then try to navigate that, that should be a little bit easier to try and do. Because I like to have a point where they can catch onto. Well, in theory, it's a good idea. And it's in. So these are, one of them is okay, one of them has a gap in them, so I need to quickly check which one had the gap. Okay, I went far too back in them instructions. But the one with the gap goes on the cockpit side, so here, which I'm assuming has something to do with the cockpit. Very helpful that the next one I picked up was that. That back end with those bits filled in. Looks pretty good. Right, that panel's in. And we'll swivel it round to its forward position, which will be ideal for us. That way we can get the mandible panels on. This is not fun to do, by the way. I wonder, right, when they were designing the one that came after this, the 2017 one, I wonder what it'd be like to move that around in comparison to see if they changed how it feels to move this one. Or that one because of the way this one was designed. Right. Fine. So, to my knowledge, final panel that goes underneath this. Right, let's see. Probably we can do this that I'm not thinking of. Might try my method from before. Well, there we go. Panel is in. So, last thing we're going to do, the falcon this stream, apart from that little bit there, because after that you put a thing on, kind of this side, far side, the cockpit is, and then after that it goes back to building pieces separately from it. So, yeah. Try to line that up to get it on, but I tell you, even though it's not actually in it, because having it on top makes it look a bit more complete. Worried there, something wasn't lining up. Oh, seeing that complete looking. That. I know it's just one bit, but it's the first bit of the ship that is you can look at it and go, that is complete. It's got its top, its middle, and its bottom. That's perfect. Right, next mandible. Oh man, seeing them panels on them mandibles makes them look even bigger. Wow. That is wow. I'll admire that for a second. A couple landing gear bits seem to like to fall off when you move it. These little bits here, I'm gonna have to get them stuck right back on. In fact, I'm sure a couple of those have somehow flung off and went missing. But they'll be right there, I suppose. So. But it's a big improvement. Definitely done what my goal was. It was to do something that changed how it looked in the live. That way, basically, yeah, I could do little bits and small details, but I wanted something that was like a big change since I don't know if I'm doing this tomorrow. Not figured that out yet. So what's these small detail bits it wants me to do? Right, last bit of building tonight. One of the 6. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, is that what those bits are for? I'll have to clamp these down a bit more. All right. And then there's a little bit of it that is actually just for detail. Helps level it as well. This model was worth every single penny. This is like along beside things like the B-Wing, the OG Cloud City, and the dropship are like the kind of coolest parts of the collection. Right. Tells you to use 3 of them, but only gives you instructions for 2 of them. That makes no sense. I'm wondering if I'm just misreading something, or these are just legit errors in the instruction manuals. It's a bit of a curiosity for me. Right. To see if I can see it. Oh, I see it. I see it. So, by the 2 hour and 20 minutes in, I'm in a happy place. I got for what of my shit done. So the next bit will be this panel that goes straight between those. That ain't gonna happen tonight. That's more than I really feel like doing. I'm gonna put the falcon back up there just so I can use my table for other things in the meantime. Plus, I might be leaving it there for a couple of days, but it is looking great. For those of you who didn't see at the start what I was talking about, I'll show you the way I've been displaying it, which is pretty much how it'll end up. I'll admit, I did think before we did all the paneling to the mandibles, I expected to do these underneath ones. I knew that last night because I did one of them, but I kind of expected to do the cockpit and then do all the paneling last, but yeah, we learned. Right. Speaking of learn, I like to see if anybody's posted picture videos online. Oh, I don't like that noise. I want to know if anyone's made guides on how to hold some of these. This UCS set is cool and all, but it is not fun to move. That does look better having its mandibles filled in. I think the best place to hold it would maybe not be where that kind of part is. Maybe that is a bit dumb, but see, once it's fully built and on the shelf and I've got the plaque next to it and the figures, it's going to come maybe move once every month or so. Oh, perhaps. Alright, I think I found a better way to move this. If I was to put my hand through here, hold it there. Ah, right. I can lift that up better now. I figured out where it's strongest. I'll just keep the stream going a little bit. I'm just going to quickly show you guys, for those who didn't see at the start, how I'm actually displaying this. Let's get the lights off because, yeah. Yes, I'm aware the camera's been cut off before anyone asks. I'm turning it back on. I still think that looks badass. Maybe I could do it for an extra one in here just to eliminate that falcon more, but I feel the kind of light. Yeah, it's not bright, but it's. I like the kind of dim atmosphere. It's quite cool, relaxing. Maybe we should get some on these shelves, but yeah, definitely a consideration thing. Well, turning the camera back on. So that's kind of how I've got it. It does look. I'm happy, right? Getting those mandibles finished. Those are one of the first properly complete parts of the Falcon. I suppose you could count the gun turrets and saying that as well. But our plan is under the mandible to have the plaque, because that just, I feel like that would like kind of align with the shelf would look cool. But yeah. So not the stream where I got the most amount of work done, but it feels like I did a lot, and I'm quite happy with that. So will there be a stream tomorrow? I have still yet to answer that. The truth is, if there's going to be a stream, I'll do a stream. Like, as in, if I'm planning on... 1 second. 1 second. Something's in there. There we go. Some sort of fly tried to go on. I'm not having that go in there. Right. But yeah, we've done quite well with it. I'm loving how much better it looks. Because obviously I had the view where I could see it's underneath. And that's something I will see quite a bit of from this shelving angle that I'm going to have it at. But I'm glad that that's all filled in. The mandibles being complete is great. Yeah, I'm quite happy. That's got a lot of good progress. I was going to stay alive a little bit more, but I don't really feel like doing all that technical stuff for that top panel. Plus, it'd be kind of cool if we start the next stream with, like, oh, hey, by the way, part 7, we're now doing all the kind of top paneling. Oh, stuff like that would be cool. But yeah, after a day when I was at work, the entire thing, the fact that you guys are getting a 2.5 hour, or did get a 2.5 hour stream, I mean, that's not too bad. Right. largest one. That'll be an interesting moment, you know, when I finally get the chance to all these years peel the sticker off this and apply it to the plaque and put the plaque in front of it. That'll be a big moment for me. 100%. I don't know if I'm going to put the figure just in the Falcon because, yeah, even though you've not seen any evidence of an interior, it does have a gunner's chair and the cockpit, which is enough for all 5 figures included. And one thing would be cool, because none of the playset versions I've ever had can do it. But the UCS, the correct amount of minifigures that go in the cockpit, you can have all 4. I might display them for the set, I don't know. The figures in the set, I don't think any of them were unique. I think the Obi-Wan might have been. Because that exact Obi-Wan, almost exact Obi-Wan, I should say, was released in 2010, the Land Speeder. The difference is, I think that's the only set that had Obi-Wan with no pupils and no cape and hood. Because it appeared with no pupils, with that torso print, but he had a hood and cape, so it would be a different version. And that's one of those minor kind of Lego things, but I suppose he would count. The Han Solo was in the Battle of Endor, the Death Star, the Leia was in the Tantive and the Death Star, the Luke was in the Death Star, the Chewbacca was in numerous sets by that point, so yeah. But if I'm not back to finish these live streams, or I don't do one for a couple of days, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Again, you'll find out relatively soon what the plan is on that one. You'll find out tomorrow, basically. And yeah, because I had to move them off the shelf that now holds a Falcon, I had to relocate the Old Republic stuff. It's been unhomed. I'll find a spot on my display for that. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this stream. I enjoyed it. I'm loving looking at it now. It's looking so much better. Not complete, obviously, but we're getting there. Probably part 8, 9, and 10 will exist. But I'll see you guys later on.